Hey guys, welcome back to Just a Geek in the Garage. So I want to continue talking about some Snap-on pliers here. I've been doing kind of a series of reasonably priced alternatives to Snap-on tools and pliers specifically, things like that. On my last video, I had a commenter who's still a student ask me if I could do a video like what I'm going to do right now, which is, what are some pliers that you would actually buy again from Snap-on? Especially if you had that 50% student discount. So this is kind of from the frame of that. But the other thing that you can kind of think about as well is, Snap-on tools. I know one of the biggest things that people say that love Snap-on tools is, hey, I'm going to buy the tool, I'm going to spend, $60 on a pair of pliers and it's going to retain its value. But in reality, when you go and sell these things, even if they're relatively new, you're going to get roughly about half the price of what they are. And I can tell you this from experience, from selling some on eBay, from looking at eBay, buying stuff on eBay, things like that. So yes, they retain their value, but it's about half of the value. So if you guys can find these ones used and you can find them for, say, roughly half of the retail price, a lot of their pliers, I think, are actually a decent deal once you look at it from that frame, because at half price they get closer to what you can get from, say, a Klein or a Channel Lock or a Knipex, things like that. So everything I've said in my last two videos still holds true, but I was framing everything from buying things brand new. So this, again, if you're finding them used, or if you're lucky enough to be a student that gets a 50% discount, then I think it's a good time to buy some of these Snap-on tools. So let's kind of get into this. And what you're going to see here, and kind of the whole premise of this particular video, is the Snap-on tools that I would buy again, even if I was paying maybe not full price, but hopefully getting some kind of a discount, are Snap-on tools that are not really made by anybody else, or at least I'm not aware of them. And they're basically kind of unique to Snap-on. So some of this would change if somebody else came out with a tool. Like, for example, this one right here, I know Icon is working on a version, and they've shown it at SEMA the last couple of years. But anyways, let's kind of get into it. So, I'm going to start off with this one. This is actually one of my newest set of pliers from Snap-on. And the thing that's kind of interesting about this guy is Snap-on has always sold a diagonal cutter and then a flush cut that looks very, very similar. But each one of them was about $60 a piece, where this one, they call it the combo cut. I wasn't able to find it online anymore. I got this off the truck, so your mileage may vary looking for this guy. But with this one, it's around $60 or so. But the interesting part about it is right here, if you can see, it kind of delineates two sections. This top part is the actual flush cut. So when you're cutting things, especially like zip ties, it does a very, very nice job of cutting them. But then if you're cutting something that's going to be a little bit harder, a nail, a screw, hard wire, things like that, you can use this section right here. So you only have to carry kind of one tool around. So I think this is a great, alternative to having two separate tools, where again, if you're buying the regular Snap-on stuff, you pay $120 for both pliers separately. This one, it's around $60. And again, if this thing can be found for cheaper, this is one I would probably buy again. Next up is going to be this guy right here. So this one, you probably are looking at it being, hey, didn't you just say skip that one on the last video? The one I actually set to skip is this guy right here. And there is some minor differences between the two, and really the difference is going to be in this section right here. So, they both have the Talon grips up here, which, grab very, very nicely. The main difference is right here, that I said on my other video, I don't like using this section because it really mars the fasteners. As you can see how aggressive those teeth are. Now, obviously, if it's something that's rusted off and you really have to put some, some pressure on it, and you don't care if you damage the fastener, then, you can use something like this. But this has what's called their flank drive built into here. And you guys can see that arrow shows you which direction to do. So it has, one side this way, one side this way. And basically, what this is designed to do, let me grab a bolt right here, is when you are, actually let me open it up real quick. And it's a slip joint, so it has 3 positions. And what this one is designed to do is when you're grabbing the fastener, oops, sorry about that, is you can see right there, it's going to grab the fastener, from the flanks like their flank drive wrenches do. So you're able to put a ton of torque on this thing without actually rounding off the fastener. or marring it up as well. So something like this, I think, is an interesting one. This one is, again, roughly about the same price as this guy right here, which I would totally skip. But this one, I think, you know, could be worth it, again, especially at the price point that we're talking about. Next up is going to be this guy. Again, you guys are probably looking at all these three pliers and saying, well, why are there so many different kinds? Well, that's, you know, one of the things about snap-ons. There's a lot of variations of kind of the same thing, but they each do something a little bit differently. So with these ones, as you can see, look quite a bit different than this one right here. And what these are really designed for is high leverage. So if you can see from this piece right here and how kind of narrow the grip is, you can grab onto something with this guy, you know, a piece of material or whatever, and this thing, you know, with very minimal pressure from you, is not going to go anywhere, right? This thing kind of went viral a bit a while back when, you know, people were basically doing pull-ups from this. It can hold you, you know, your body weight and things like that if you grab something above you. So something like this, and you know, this one does also have the 2 positions, so you can see you can grab something and you can see how it's kind of leveraged right there, where, you know, I'm opening it and you see how little this thing is opening right there. So this set of pliers, I think, is, you know, one to go for. However, these things are objectively expensive. These things are close to $100, you know, from Snap-on. So that's why I'm actually looking forward to Icon coming out with their version of this, because, you know, hopefully they'll be able to sell it for, you know, 30, 35 bucks or something like that. And especially with a discount that you can get from Harbor Freight, typically, I think they would be a pretty good deal for something like this. But for right now, I think Snap-on is kind of the go-to for something like this. And again, if you're able to get a discount on it, you know, all the better. Next up, again, this is going to be kind of a tool that was featured before, but I'll give you kind of my rationale on what I would buy and what I would skip. So if you're looking here, I don't have the 9-inch ones on here, and the reason why is because you can buy the Icon version. They're already out. You can have, these things are about, you know, 30 bucks, where these things are about, I think, 75 or so. And that's 30 bucks, and you can probably still have it closer to 20, you know, on one of their sales. So that's why I would say, you know, skip this guy and get this guy instead. However, as of right now, at least, they don't make these sizes, right? For me, you know, this is the 5-inch, and this is the, I want to say this is the 4-inch. Let me just verify here real quick. Actually, no, I'm sorry. This is the 7-inch, this is the 5-inch, and this is the 9-inch. So the 5-inch one right here is, you know, I've said this in many videos before, is probably my most used plier, you know, in my garage. It kind of just sits on a magnet on my workbench here within arm's length, and I grab it whenever I'm doing things. Yes, it is objectively expensive for what it is, but considering how much I actually use this thing, I mean, I probably touch this thing almost every single day for one project or another. And so I think it's, you know, it was worth it for that. You know, I had bought these in a set of 3 for a reasonable price, so that's why I was able to kind of justify buying them. So I didn't pay anywhere near what the retail price would be. And for what I'm saying of which ones to buy is, really depends on what you're kind of working on. So if you're working on smaller things, you know, this one, again, very useful to have with you. This one, the 7-inch version, you know, I think is a better size for most projects than the 9-inch one. I think as far as, you know, when you a lot of times when you're grabbing a needle nose type plier or long nose type plier, you're usually working on smaller things and you need, you know, better access. So one of these guys I would look at. You know, pricing wise, I think this is probably going to be in around the $50 or $60 range. Again, pretty expensive, and this one is not going to be that far off from it either. And just a notable mention as well, let me see if I can grab this one, is going to be this little guy as well, which is basically just a small version of this one, but sometimes it's nice having just this little guy to use. So to answer the question of my commenter, these are probably the ones that I would buy if I was in your place and was lucky to have that 50% discount, or if you can buy stuff on eBay. Now, you know, I have bought used Snap-on stuff before, like I mentioned before, and once you get to that kind of 50% off, I think is the magic number, because, again, if you're looking at something like, you know, this, for example, that's about, you know, actually, you know what, let's grab an Icon equivalent. Let's say you're looking at this guy, right? And this one retails for Snap-on about $60. if you can pick this guy up for $30 or even less for a used version of it, especially if it's in pretty good condition, because there's nothing wrong with Snap-on tools. I've never said anything necessarily bad about their tools themselves. It's just the pricing that I think is crazy, but the tools usually work very, very well, especially with that lifetime warranty. But if you can grab these guys for say $30, where if I was to walk into a Harbor Freight and buy the Icon equivalent and it's like $22, I personally think for $8 extra it's worth it to have the actual Snap-on version. That depends on you guys, obviously, but again, whether you're willing to buy used tools or not is kind of up to each individual, whether they're comfortable with doing that or not. And sometimes you can find these things at flea markets and things like that. I've found some Snap-on tools before there. Sometimes you get them for really, really good deals. Sometimes you don't. So this video again was just kind of an idea from one of my commenters. Hopefully you guys like this kind of content. And like I've said before, please leave your suggestions below. I take them seriously, and I'll make videos if it's something that I have available to me. And I'm able to do the content, I will try to make the video for you guys. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe.